Welcome artists. Today we are going to be exploring watercolor pencils. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to take some of our paper that's been cut to fit our sketchbooks, and we're going to glue that in. Alright, then we're going to start getting our paper set up. So on the first page you're going to write watercolor pencils at the top. Now the difference between watercolor pencils and regular pencils is, actually we'll look at the difference here. But one thing that you do want to pay attention to is that watercolor pencils have on it where it says watercolor on it, and regular pencils do not have that. So just as a quick example of the difference between the two, one of these are watercolor pencils and the other is regular. So let's see which one is which. So I'm adding water to this one and nothing is happening. This is just a regular color pencil. Whereas for this one, I add it and you can see that it turns it into, basically it kind of looks like paint. And the reason for this is that in a regular color pencil, the binder that holds the pigment together is usually kind of a wax or oil based, whereas on the watercolor pencils, the binder is water soluble, meaning that it will dissolve in water. So we're going to write water soluble. That's the big difference between the two. Alright, and then I've got a couple tips that I just want you to write down as well on here before we get started working with them. First one is that when you're working with these, you want to make sure that you brush water onto the light areas first whenever you're trying to make lights and darks, and we'll do an example of that. Next tip is that you should be overlapping multiple colors when you're doing this. One of the nice things about watercolor pencils is that you can layer the different colors that you have and end up making some pretty cool shades by doing that when the water gets on there and it mixes together. And then the next tip is that you can definitely layer on different layers of this, but you do need to make sure that the paper is dry between those layers, otherwise it can just get kind of messy and not work out all that well. Alright, so those are the tips that I have for you. You're also going to answer some questions as you're doing this, and just kind of reflecting on what you're thinking about watercolor pencils and if you're planning on using them or not. Alright, so then we're also going to set up our paper on this side too. We're going to divide it down the middle first, and then we're going to want a total of 6 sections, so we're going to add a couple lines in here to divide that. I find that just putting my hand down is a good way to do it. Okay, so in this first one, we are going to be doing just some small little mini value scales. For this one, we're going to be doing one color to a new color. In this one, we're going to be exploring textures and lines. And the next one, we're going to practice with adding water to the paper first. Actually, we're going to write that wet paper. Wet paper first. On the next one, we are going to be looking at how you can actually put the pencil, the watercolor pencil on your brush first. So I was putting the pencil on the brush instead of putting the pencil on the paper. And then finally, you can mix colors on a separate paper first, which is kind of an interesting way to do it as well. So we're going to start over at this side. One of our tips is to brush water on light areas first. So actually that's going to be a tip that we come to right away. For this, we're just going to choose any color, and we're going to be shading dark. So more pressure to light. I'm going to choose one more color to just try this on. Okay, so I'm going to take my paintbrush and I'm going to start on the light side because that was our first tip here. And I'm kind of just going back and forth, and that's going to get me that light to dark. I'm going to rinse my brush off and do the same thing with the green one. And again, now I have light to dark on here as well. For the two colors, you're going to pick two watercolor pencils, and basically you're going to do the same thing. But this time, they are going to overlap in the middle. So I'm going to start in the middle and work my way out. And then those colors will start to blend in the middle. I'm going to try one more, and this time I'm going to do, do yellow and red. Alright, for this one, we're going to just do a variety of different textures and lines on our paper. And this is where overlapping multiple colors really helps because you get to see the textures and lines a little bit better. So you get to do some cross hatching. Let's do gonna do one more. It's called scumbling. Basically just kind of some controlled scribbles. And for this one, it helps if you move the paintbrush in the direction that you did your lines in. So this is going to leave you with those lines showing through, and so if you're doing something where that texture would work, this is a good technique to try. Alright, for this next one, this is where you actually wet the paper first, so I'm just going to draw some kind of basic shapes here. And so this is just plain water to brush on first. Alright, for for the next one, you're going to have a wet brush. And you're going to put a watercolor pencil on first. And then finally, for this one, on a separate sheet of paper, And this one's really good for mixing different colors together and kind of seeing what they'll look like first and then using it on your paper. All right, so make sure that you do the reflection questions as well, and that's watercolor pencils.